So the title of my talk tonight is The Tyranny of the Ego. And there's a little bit of hyperbole there, as you'll see, but I just like the way that sounded. So. But I do want to talk about the ego in our practice and the impact and how it can really impede our progress on the path. The term ego is not a term found anywhere in Buddhist literature. It's a Western modern term, as you probably know. About 40 years ago, it sort of found its way into Western Buddhism as a way of talking about the self or non-self, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a second. But it's also not the ego that we talk about in psychology, where Freud talked about the superego, which was sort of the conscience, and the id was sort of unbridled impulse, and the ego was sort of the mediating part of that system. So that's not the ego we're going to talk about. Nor are we going to talk about when it's used to say, oh, he's an egotist or something, someone's very full of himself. That's not the context either. It really is going to talk about address rather than sense of self or how the Buddha taught that. So you remember that, so 2,500 years ago the Buddha taught for 40 years. There was no written language in those days. It was an oral tradition, and that lasted for almost approximately 500 years. And then they began to write stuff down. But they used a lot of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, lots of numbered lists, which I think was probably in their mind just to remember as they passed it down to the next generation of monks and lay people. But anyway, you may remember the 3 marks of existence that the Buddha talked about: dukkha, which is suffering, or dissatisfaction, impermanence, and then this notion of self or no self. And that's what I want to try to tackle tonight. It's always been a little bit of a challenge in my own practice to understand that there's lots of opinions, there's lots of stuff written on this question of no self or non-self. So, but when the term ego is used in Buddhism, it's really referring to the self in the sense that we might have of a firm, solid self. So it's really suggesting something which is can be a real stumbling block on the path, as I said a moment ago. The Pali word for no self is anatta, and that's and this term and this concept has probably been debated since the time of the Buddha. There's books written about it. So I'm going to try to dissect that a little bit tonight and see if I can lend some understanding to it, because I hear often that it's a tough concept for a lot of us. And I'll probably use the terms interchangeably, self and ego, but the idea is that this ego, this thing that we think is a solid, permanent self, is also that place from which greed, hatred, delusion, self-hatred, all these other negative sorts of experiences arise. That they come up out of that sort of sense of this is me, and I've got to be right, and I've got to be correct, and I've got to win, and I've got all these things. So that's really the ego in the Buddhist sense, that sense of solid self that's creating that. And so it's really become an umbrella term for grasping, clinging, longing for recognition. Really an impediment to seeing things clearly as they really are, really seeing the truth of things. There's where that solid, that illusion of a solid self gets in the way. This is from the Connected Discourses of the Buddha, and he says, and what bhikkhus is the Pali word for monks, and what bhikkhus is attachment? There are these 4 kinds of attachment. Attachment of sensual pleasures, attachment of views, attachment of rules and vows, and attachment of words of self. Attachment of words of self. This is called attachment. So there he's saying that if we cling to this notion of self, a solid self, and of course the noble truths have to do with clinging, attachment, grasping as a practice of suffering in our lives. this is where I've struggled with it some over the years, and he's not saying, I don't believe, that there's no sense of me. I mean, obviously, we all walk around with a sense of me, I. But typically, we don't recognize the impermanence of that me. There's the solid, we have this illusion of the solid self. We don't really see the impermanence and the ever-changing notion of that sense of self, of me. And the paradox here, I think, is that the more we trust in our awareness, trust our heart as we begin to awaken, we begin to move away from that ego, that sense of solid self. And it's there that we find ease, we find grace, we find true happiness, once we can set aside this notion of a solid self. So I would suggest that qualities like striving for perfection, for constant self-improvement, which is something we do in the West quite a bit, for acceptance by others, all of those are ego-driven kinds of activities. And I think one reason we cling to this is because it gives us a sense of control. Again, I think that's an illusion, but it does give us a sense of being in control of our world and our circumstances. We human beings love predictability and love things to be as we want them to be. But in order to feel in control, we have to deny the fact of impermanence. The truth of impermanence cannot exist with the sense of our being in control, because things are always changing. And that includes everything we run into in our lives. It includes what goes on inside of us. It includes our family members, whatever. But it's that ego that wants fixed plans. They want to know, this is going to happen tomorrow, this is going to happen next week. And we can only suffer with that if it doesn't happen. So if I've got this plan about how I want things to be, and I want to go on a picnic, and it rains, and then I'm suffering because, oh gosh, my plan of having a beautiful picnic is just undone by the rain. So we still need that sense of me in the conventional sense to interact with people in the world. I mean, we don't go around with no self in the sense that, there's nothing there to interact with each other, with family members and so forth. But it's when that notion of self becomes overgrown, becomes inflexible, and it loses its fluidity, loses the ability to kind of go with the change, that's when we begin to get into trouble. Because we're always trying to grab onto it. Don't want to get off, don't want to get this, don't want to do that. So the object is not to kill the ego or get rid of it. It's to understand what it is with clarity and then adapt to it. Adapt to that which is wanting permanence, wanting predictability in life. And I think in some of the teachings, this notion of ego, again, of the solid sense of self, really produces these thoughts, which I think for all of us can be harmful, thoughts of me and mine. It creates things like selfish desire, craving, attachment, hatred, ill will, conceit, pride, egotism, other defilements, impurities, and problems, is what we call it. You may recall the 8 worldly winds. There's another list of 8 things that the Buddha talked about. Praise and blame sort of being the 2 poles, gain and loss, fame and shame, pleasure and pain. But again, I would suggest that all of those have to do with the ego, with that sense of that's what's wants the pleasure and not the pain, that which wants the gain and not the loss. It's how we sort of keep score, it's how we think we're going to be happy. If I win more than I lose, if I gain more than I lose, then I should be okay. But by coming at it from a sense of impermanence, I think we can begin to really, it really becomes an antidote to the world of awareness. We can begin to lower our reactivity, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But it really is another opportunity in our practice to wake up to the reality of the sense of self, to wake up to the reality of who are we really. So the question becomes, how do I Do I bounce back and forth between these worldly winds all the time? Or do I just watch them happen without getting identified with them? Do I just watch them happen without, because if I get identified with them, I'm going to be reactive. I'm going to react to them. They're going to drive me nuts. But if I can just observe them and not get pulled in and identify with them, then it's going to be much easier. My reactivity is going to come down. My equanimity is going to go up. I'm just going to feel more inner peace, more sense of that in my body. So if we could, let's do just a brief reflection. And this is an eyes open reflection. So just take a moment and look at your hands. And ask yourself, are these hands really me? Is this the me? And what if we lost our hands in an accident? Would I still be myself? Would I still be me? Or look at your legs and ask the same question. If I didn't have these legs, am I still me? So we go through this process and it comes down, so what part of me is really me? What are we talking about? What is it that if I no longer had it, I'd no longer be myself? What if, I'm not talking about death here, I'm talking about while I'm alive. Is there any part of the body that if it was gone, I would know with certainty that there was no longer a me? And folks will often say, oh, it's my brain. That's the me. The me is in my brain. It makes me who I am. But what specifically in our brain makes the me? I mean, is it our thoughts? Is it our physiology? Is it our autonomic nervous system? What is it in that system? And again, I think there's no firm me there either. Or is it our personality, our memories, our values, our abilities, our skills? Is that the me? Is that the solid self? Or is it the labels we give ourselves? Young, old, sick, healthy, smart, dumb, Democrat, Republican, rich, poor, whatever. Is that where we find it? Again, those things can change. So the question becomes, if we have no labels, would we still be us? Take all the labels away. Female, white, wealthy, whatever it is. Because the things that we think make us who we are only the parts of who we are, but none of them alone is who we are. And those parts are subject to impermanence, to constant change. There's no solid permanent self. It's an ever-changing experience. And once we recognize that and sort of yield to it, then that's a real opportunity for our suffering to diminish. So another analogy, think about a car. If we take the car apart, separate all the components, put it out in our garage, none of these parts alone constitute a car. Got all these parts there, where's the car? Because to be a car has to have all those parts working together. But they're constantly changing. They're wearing out, they need replacement, the oil is changing, the lights go out. It's not, even the car, it's not a permanent sense of what it is there. It's this combination of ever-changing components. And this is not stable, it's not fixed. It is actively dynamic, and it's ever-changing, as with all things that are permanent. You're not the same person here now that you were this morning. You're 12 hours older, or maybe whatever the changes were. Subtle physiological changes are happening all the time. So then how does this notion of no self or no ego apply in our day-to-day lives, and why is it useful? Well, as I said a few minutes ago, at the most basic level, it helps us tame our reactivity. It really helps us get a handle on our It moves us off of this autopilot to an awareness of the present moment where all phenomena arise and pass through continually. And that's really the truth of experience. It's ever-changing, rising and passing away. And when we deny that truth, we're going to get blindsided. We're going to get kicked because something's going to come along and remind us that there's no permanence, there's no solid experience, there's no solid self. We get sick. We cleanse for that. We do what we can. I got a flu shot today. Hopefully I won't get the flu. I still are, but that's the price we pay. So consider the next time someone offends you or says something you don't like. We can ask ourselves, what part or parts of me have really been offended? Because if someone offends us, the first thing is to be reactive, to push back, to have a strong reaction. But what if I'm asking the question, where's the offense here? Is it my heart? Is it my brain? Whatever. That's what I mean about if we recognize the truth of no self, we can better manage our reaction. And if I'm reactive, is that the result of the causes and conditions of my life up till now? Is that where that comes from? So if we really dig down on this concept, I think it can really be an important tool for beginning to set our ego, set the notion of the permanent self aside. Of recognizing that it's an illusion, and that that which I think is a solid me really is not. My sense of self that makes me think who I am is only a part of me. It's not the whole me. That's elusive. That's, as I said, ever-changing. So I think this can be a really powerful and important part of our practice. I know personally in the past, I've been highly reactive, tended to take everything personally. And I just expended a tremendous amount of energy managing that me, that self, that ego, just trying to keep it under wraps and just tremendous amount of energy just trying to control it, just trying to control how I was in the world, how I thought I needed to be, how other people thought I needed to be, how my family growing up thought I needed to be. And that's where that stuff comes from. We grew up in a situation where there's a lot of emphasis on succeeding, on appearances, on whatever. That's just feeding that need to have that sort of permanent ego. I am this person. And one of the things that really gets in the way of our seeing this more clearly is the shame that we feel if we deviate from that script, from that notion of who we should be. Because somehow if I'm not that, then I'm likely to feel ashamed if I'm this. Because the implicit message is this is bad. This notion over here is good and desirable. And our ego really pushes back against honestly allowing people to see us. I mean, especially in our culture. It's so performance-based. It's so appearance-based. I mean, corporations spend millions of dollars trying to feed us that stuff. It's one of the things that's going to destroy the planet. But they always want us to get the new car, get the new clothes, get the new whatever, get the white teeth. So it's everywhere. It's part of the culture. And many of us grew up with those kinds of messages. Often, when I taught retreats, folks will come to me and say, I had this most profound experience. And I really don't know how to put it into words. And they'll say things like, I just felt my ego dissolve for a moment when I was sitting. Or I felt like I was pure awareness. I didn't have a sense of where I ended and someone else began. And I think that's just a little taste of that sense of transcending that notion of permanent self. It really can move us out of that sense of, and I think that's one of the benefits of all the retreats, really begin to explore that kind of question and really experience it firsthand. And it doesn't last, and hopefully we don't cling to it and expect it to last, but it's really a way of seeing beyond this notion of solid self. Because for those moments, there is nothing. That's why we call it insight meditation. We have those experiences which really help us see clearly what's going on in the world. What's the truth of our experience? What's the truth of being alive? I like this teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh. And he talks about the left hand and the right hand. And he says, imagine you have a hammer in your right hand and your left hand is holding a nail. You put the nail in a piece of wood, you hammer it, and it slips and hits your thumb. You smash it. And the first reaction, he says, is to drop the hammer. The right hand is going to take the thumb of the left hand and comfort it and hold it because it's experiencing pain. But he goes on to say, imagine if the left hand is thinking, as soon as this stops hurting, I'm going to pick up that hammer and hit the right hand back. But obviously it doesn't work that way, right? Because we understand that it's one and the same. It's all part of this ever-changing organism. And there's no benefit to the left hand retaliating to the right hand. And I think that's a good, useful metaphor for this experience. So, just to sort of wrap up, this whole notion of the tyranny of the ego, as I said, that was a little bit earlier, but it really is to begin to understand and work with this notion of no self. It's been volumes written about it in the last 2,500 years. And to let go of that permanent belief in a solid me. So I want to close with a poem by Claude McKay. He was a Jamaican poet, and he died in 1948. He was well known in the Caribbean, not so much in the States. And he says, I plucked my soul out of its secret place and held it to the mirror of my eye to see it like a star against the sky. A twitching body quivering in space, a spark of passion shining on my face. And I explored it to determine why this awful key to my infinity conspires to rob me of sweet joy and grace. And if the sign may not be fully read, if I can comprehend but not control, I need not gloom my days with futile dread, because I see a part and not the whole. Contemplating the strange, I'm comforted by this narcotic thought and know my soul. So we've got a few minutes. If anyone has comments or questions or thoughts, because this is a challenging time. Yes?
You mentioned winds of change.
The 8 worldly winds.
Is that W-I-N-S or W-I-N-D-S?
DS, winds. You get blown between loss and gain, praise and blame. Yes, Bill.
Jeff, can you talk about applying mindfulness? Obviously, is going to be a big part of making progress. But can you help us with things in real life that either mantras or places where we can go or to remind ourselves of this phenomenon early in the stage of interaction with unpleasant or difficult situations so that we don't.
It's challenging in that I think there's not a sort of specific approach to it, Bill, but there is this, I like to work backwards from cultivating equanimity, reducing reactivity, that I can see, where that's hitting me when someone offends me. Then it's an opportunity to sort of see, well, where's that hitting? Where's the reactivity trying to come up with me? That sort of thing. But it's equally important, I think, in terms of the mindfulness, is just to reflect on that as we sit, and just sort of reflect on any of the sort of analogies that I spoke about. Because it's an elusive concept. I think impermanence is pretty understandable, suffering is pretty understandable. This one can be a bit of a conundrum. All right.
I think I get, if I can, I think I get the concept of no self. And the longer I sit and become mindful of my thoughts, the more annoyed I become with the thoughts. So many of them have to do with how I'm perceived.
Yes.
That annoys me. There's some reactivity there, I suppose. But I'm wondering, so if I have this basic understanding, how do I then apply it to, and maybe that was Bill's question as well, but how do I apply it to this basic, I guess it's a basic insecurity, or I don't know, not following my parents' rules. I don't know what it is, but how do I make those stop?
Well, I don't think they can stop. But first of all, you recognize they're not you, right? They're just chatter. And secondly, we just learn to watch them without identifying. I mean, the thing that hooks us is we identify with them rather than just watch them rise and pass away. Because I constantly have this chatter, a lot of self-judgment going on. But the more I can see it as that and just kind of watch it and not get pulled into it, then the less power it sort of seems to hold over us. So try not to get overly identified with the chatter. Yes?
I have a basic question back on meditation, if you will. I see, at least where I am in meditation, there's two sides of either I'm present with my breath, and that's what I'm conscious of, or I'm lost in a story or a thought or planning or what have you. But when I hear you talk about watching the thoughts arise and fall away, that implies there's some middle ground. Could you talk about that middle ground?
Yeah, the basic rule of thumb, I think, is that we welcome whatever comes up during our meditation, whether that's chatter, whether that's a strong sensation, a strong emotion, but we just want to watch it and not identify with it. And the part that hooks us is when we get identified. This is what this means, or this is who I am, or this chatter is really about, the truth of me. And I love that analogy. I don't know who first used it, but imagine the thoughts as just clouds in the sky passing over. You're just watching them. You're not doing anything else. You're not arguing with them or getting identified with them. You're just watching them pass through. Because they come and they go, they come and they go. I think we can get into this trap of trying to suppress those thoughts or push them away. And that sort of, mindfulness is just letting that awareness just land there and just welcome whatever comes up without getting identified with it, which is a real challenge. I mean, I've certainly struggled with that in my own practice. But it's really important. And the beauty of retreats, actually, I put in another point for retreats, is that we're quiet longer. We really can begin to see this more clearly. The thoughts slow down. We can watch them more easily because they tend to just get a little slower, a little quiet. And it's really a way to move the practice along. Yes, ma'am.
So you're not saying to evaluate the thoughts, and because I was getting, well, I have these thoughts now, I need to tell myself, don't identify with that, don't be reactive. And then I'm thinking, and then I thought the deal was to, whenever I have the thoughts, like you said, let them go and then just come back to my breath. Because the way I usually do things is I try to figure things out. And that's not, that doesn't give me any relief.
Right.
It's when I come back, I just notice and then come back to the breath.
Because if you're trying to figure them out, then you become identified with them. You're in some kind of an argument. What does this mean? What does that mean? Is this true about me? Is that true? Whereas that's just chatter. That's just chatter. Come back to it. It's really about learning to focus, learning to quiet the noise in our brains, and really achieve some real peace. That's the wonderful gift of this practice.
I currently have a teacher around the no self in my mother's Alzheimer's, and it's been a really interesting experience as everything begins to fall away. All her habits, identities, and roles, and then her memories, and then her understanding, comprehension, habits of interaction, as it all begins to dissolve. She's still there. And so there's that no self and self, right? There's like,
Yeah.
Okay, there is something there, and it's profoundly her, and yet all the things that always sort of looked like her are not
Oh,
there. And it's been a really profound thing.
that's a perfect teaching, I think. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Because she's there, she's obviously, her name's the same, her appearance is the same. But where is she?
And yet it's a felt thing. There is an energy that's there, which again, I don't even think of as like a solid self. It's just a presence that I'm experiencing with her in whatever moment we're in, because she's only in the moment.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Thinking about that, a year ago, June, when my mother was dying, I was actually with her over there, and as she died, it was sort of like, well, where did she go? I mean, there's the corpse, but it's even the next step in that process, because there was no her there anymore. I mean, there was this vehicle, this vessel, but there was no her there. And that's what you suggested, a really good way to think about that. Yeah, this is a tough topic. I mean, maybe I don't have the final word on it. I'm still struggling with it some in my own practice. But it's important, and I think it's worth the effort to delve into it. And there's tons of it going on with lots of different opinions, but it's pretty juicy once you so be in a few minutes. Yes, I'm sorry.
To apply this concept of no self into our daily life, and just like we were talking about, if someone offends you, we need to know why, where it's coming from. Can we just observe our feelings and
Yes.
responses and go of it rather than...
That's what I meant to say. I mean, I didn't want to sort of examine it, right? Did you hear the question about in daily life, when someone offends you, do you sort of try to work with whatever's coming up rather than just acknowledge it and then set it aside? And to your point, we don't want to get into an argument with it today. We just want to say, okay, that's hitting me here or there, and can I manage my reactivity? And sometimes we just feel whatever it is to sort of start to arise, and there's that little gap there that allows us to step back from it enough to say, okay, see what that is, but I don't need to go there. I think that's one of the beauties about how this practice helps us manage reactivity. I mean, of all the gifts that this practice has been in my own life, that's probably number one or number two. It's just taming some of that reactivity. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Have a good week.